name is Dr. Joan Borysenko, and it's such a privilege to be able to talk to you today a little bit about resilience. During the AIDS epidemic, I worked at a hospital in Boston, and I was running a mind-body clinic for people with AIDS. And this was before we even knew about HIV. It was at that point a mystery, immunodeficiency disease. And I remember so well what it was like to work on the front lines of that, what it was like for everybody, for people on the janitorial staff, for people who were receptionists, for doctors and nurses and respiratory therapists and phlebotomists and everybody. It was a time of such great stress, great grief, and terrible uncertainty. And that epidemic got me very interested in the nature of resilience. So I want to give you a few tips from a book that I wrote about resilience, and it's called It's Not the End of the World, Developing Resilience in Times of Change. This is certainly a huge time of change, and I believe that there'll be much more change coming at us very quickly in the years that follow. And what we want to be able to do is not only to meet the challenge of what's happening now, but to come out of it with new strengths rather than post-traumatic stress. So a couple of little tools. I think the most important tool is one another, whether it's just an extra minute that you spend talking from your heart to people you work with who can understand you, or whether you go home and in the few minutes that you have, make sure that you've really connected with your family as well, maybe connected on FaceTime or Skype or Zoom. That we're social animals, we human beings, and what calms down our nervous systems is actually connecting with one another. Another very important tool is your breathing. And I think we all know that. Everyone says, oh, I'm anxious, I gotta take a breath. But it's easier to forget that in the middle of really difficult things that are going on around us. But it's so simple. Nobody even needs to know you're doing it. And you're always breathing. You can do other things too. But there's one type of breathing that very quickly shifts the gears of your nervous system. And it calms down the fight or flight response, and it brings more peace and calm, brings up parasympathetic nervous system activity. And so that is pursed lip breathing, just breathing in through your nose and breathing out fully through your mouth with pursed lips. The more complete the out breath, the deeper the next in breath through the nose. And out through the mouth. Generally speaking, when you do that, the breath will slow down maybe to 4 breaths a minute. And a minute or 2 of that will actually change the activity in your vagus nerve and in your central nervous system. Now, when I wrote the book on resilience, I found that no matter what group was being studied, the resilience, how they got resilience was the same. And there are studies certainly of kids who've been abused and neglected. And by the way, for them, a mentor Somebody who simply sees them and relates as a human being makes all the difference in the world. But whether we're talking about kids or burned out healthcare workers, or people who are fleeing, who are refugees or prisoners of war or vets, the three kind of secrets of resilience are the same. So let's take a look at those. One of them is simply realism. When things are going down, you can't miss a thing. You have to be present and look the beast right in the eyeballs, and then take stock and say, all right, this is like a time of total uncertainty. I cannot control everything. And the focus needs to be on what can you control? What is the one thing, moment by moment, that you can focus on and do that will make a difference? That's true in your professional life, and it's true in your personal life. When you get home at the end of a work day, and I know work days might be very long for some of you, and you might be very sleep deprived right now. But the question is, what is the most important thing to do in the few minutes that you have? Do you need to just say to everybody, if there are people at home with you, a few things from your heart, maybe one thing from the day that you were really grateful for? That makes a big difference. And by the way, we know if, and it might have been, maybe somebody who was really sick simply looked at you with such gratitude. And if you take that in when it's happening, savor the feeling of gratitude in your body. And you try to do that through the day. It actually installs that good in your nervous system and calms you down. And then at night, you can share that with a loved one. Every night before we go to bed, my husband and I say, what's the one thing today that really lighted you up? And, yesterday it was the blossoms on an apricot tree. I stopped and I really took in that beauty. In the middle of absolute horror, the sky is still blue. The clouds are still moving. The trees are still putting out leaves. Find beauty where you can, and it really counters the stress response. Okay, those are a few things you can do that you can control. Very, very important. The second thing, so the first is realism there and controlling what you can. The second is being creative. And boy, have we seen creativity. Scientists doing experiments in a collaborative way that's faster than anything that we've ever seen before. People making personal protective equipment out of whatever is available. People on janitorial services in New York hospitals bringing in whatever cleaning supplies they have at home that are going to make a difference and help when there's a shortage of these things. So allow yourself the latitude to create. And of course, hopefully in ways that are always safe for whoever is involved. So creativity. The third is having a larger perspective, being able to put this really terrible pandemic into something higher, some higher purpose. And I remember reading about the late Senator John McCain several years ago. He had been a POW for 5 years. And the question really is that was put to him, what kept him alive in a POW camp where a lot of people gave up? They simply gave up. And if you give up and you lose hope, the body gives up as well. So what kept him hopeful and alive? And he said it was his faith. And if you've got faith, that is a beautiful thing. But your faith doesn't have to be religious faith if that's not your way of seeing the world. I have faith that at the end of this pandemic, we're going to see, oh boy, the healthcare system worked well in some ways and poorly in others. It failed people of color, and that should never happen. And I do believe that because the cracks have been revealed, we're going to model a stronger, more affordable healthcare system that works for all. I think we've seen, my goodness, we're all interconnected. There's no such thing as my job is more important than your job. We all work together as a team. And people who may have seemed invisible before now are very visible to most of us as so important. And I'm thinking a silver lining may be that we'll have that sense. Everybody's important and everybody needs a good working wage. I think there are a lot of things that will come out of this, and that's a higher perspective in and of itself. I will say that if you're the kind of person who is prayerful, and there's an old saying, there are no atheists in foxholes, and some of you really are in a foxhole right now, like a war zone. I think it's always helpful to close your eyes and call upon something greater than yourself. You could call upon whatever that force of intelligence is in nature itself. You could call upon God the Father, or Jesus Christ, or God the Mother, or whatever it is that your heart is expansive enough to touch. Call upon a saint. Call upon, like, hey, help, is there anybody there? And pause for a moment and let that feeling of goodness from this universe fill you. Because right now, you are the eyes, you are the ears, you are the heart, you are the hands of that larger source, of that divine that's out there giving help. And I want to say to you, thank you. Thank you. God bless you for who you are and for all you do. And we will get through this together.